How do I reduce my payroll tax is what we're talking about today in the East Central Business Show. I'm joined by a resident expert accountant, Robert King from Experian. Good morning.
Good to be here again. Thanks, John.
Fabulous. Now, we're talking about payroll tax. Now, this happens at a certain level. I'm a small business person. I don't really get it.
Yeah.
Educate me, please, Robert.
All right. So payroll tax, just as a quick definition, a lot of people get confused as to what it actually is. They think it's the tax on their staff salaries. But what payroll tax is basically is that once you start employing lots of people and your wage levels go above a particular level, then you've got to pay an extra tax to the government, just an extra one,
that's fabulous.
just for the joy of employing people.
Yeah.
And that tax and that level and the amount you pay is different between state by state. It's not a federal federal tax; it's a state one.
Oh, so it's not in the ATO. It's not the ATO collecting this money.
Nope. State by state. So yes, each one has its own threshold. So for example, and thresholds change every year, so you've got to be mindful of that as well, because one year you might be okay, the next year you won't. So I think.
So you're not going to do specifics for us today then at all?
Oh, look, I know South Australia is one of the lowest tax at the moment, and I think ACT has the highest threshold. So, so what you've got to look at, if you're a business owner and you've got businesses in different states, maybe you can juggle to try and reduce your payroll tax, juggle staff between states perhaps, and move them to states that have a higher threshold than another state. So it can't always be done, but if you're in that position and you're lucky enough to do that, that's a possible way.
Well, you're not going to put your staff on a bus and send them to South Australia, right?
No. Well,
that'd be a cruel thing. No, we won't say it. There might be some South Australians watching.
You're looking at one, actually. So.
That's Aussie Rules fan, that's right. That's where it comes.
Well, the interesting thing is when it's a state by state, one of the things they look at is when you issue a staff member a payment summary or their group certificates, they look at the address that's on that payment slip. Really? If your staff member has the fact that they live in one state and you try and declare them in another state, that's what they go by. That's one of the main things they go by. So you've got to be careful.
Yeah. So what are the other things you get on around this sort of thing? So and what's included? Is it just how much is on their group certificate?
No, not at all. So wages is the first step in the process. So when they're looking at your threshold, they look at wages. They look at the amount of superannuation you've paid your staff as well.
Yeah.
They also look at your contractors. So if you've got contractors in, they look at some, not all contractors.
All contractors? No, not all.
Not all, and I'll touch on that in a sec. And the fourth thing is fringe benefits tax. So if you're providing staff with vehicles or some other things.
Lavish holidays, conference attendances.
Of course, all tax deductible. But, so there's not just your wages, there's quite a few components to it. And when you're filling out your payroll tax form, you've got to make sure you include those on there. So that's the included part of it.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So what's the implications then? I mean, you fess up about all this stuff and they take that at face value, or they then go have a bit of a dig around, they get dart from the ATO?
Look, not the ATO.
I mean, you're obligated to tell the truth.
Of course.
Yes.
Government systems are getting a lot better. They are a lot smarter than they used to be. And they've got, I suppose, a grouping provision as well, where they look at not only your company, but whether you're grouped with other businesses as well.
Oh, okay.
So when we talk about grouping, they talk about whether you've got common staff. So you've got a business, say in Adelaide, and a business in Queensland, as an example. If you're sharing staff, they can group those companies. Or if you've got common ownership of those companies, they'll group them again. Or if you've got common control or directors, they'll group it. So then when I say they group it, they add the wages of all those different entities within the group to see whether you meet that threshold or not. So it's really important that if you've got a business that really shouldn't be grouped with you because of that common control or staff, try and put something in place to get that company outside the group so it brings your threshold down as well.
Okay. Is there any exemptions in around this sort of stuff as well? Is it?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things in there. Typically, if you have staff in hospitals, charities, they're exempt from the payroll tax, which is great.
Okay.
They also exempt if you're employing someone through an employment agency. that is exempt as well, because it's actually the employment agency that gets hit with the payroll tax rather than you as well. So there's a few exemptions there. Also, we talked about what's included in the wages. There's some exemptions there. So, for example, wages doesn't include things like what's a few things in there. Dividends is a good example. If you're a business owner, you might pay yourself a combination of wages, but also dividends or even trust distributions. They're excluded from the definition of wages. Car parking is excluded, strangely enough. Apprentices are excluded. They're not on the radar at all. And some
see the incentive there, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And some contractors. So I said contractors are included, but in a few situations, so for example, if that contractor's only working for you for less than 90 days, or if they're providing a service that you don't need typically for less or more than 180 days, or if that contractor can employ someone else to do the job, then they can fall outside that scope of being in that payroll tax net as well. So there's a few sort of
nuances and obviously this stuff changes from time to time as well, as you said earlier. Yeah. So
and again, it's as said, it's different state by state. So a few different rules, regulations around that. So, but you need to be on top of it because again, they're actually harder to deal with than the ATO.
I was going to ask you, like, what's the first notice you get, or the first point of contact you're going to get in regards to this?
You'll get a letter. You'll get a letter basically saying, we think you've gone over your threshold, and they go back and they want usually about 3 years of past data that you've got to then get together. It's quite a long process. And we saw a client that his previous accountant put a wrong figure on his tax return and said that instead of his wages being 200,000, he had it as being 2 million. And it was just a simple error on the company tax return.
Yes.
And that triggered straight away a payroll tax audit, because he said, you've got $2 million worth of wages, why aren't you paying payroll tax?
Oh.
And it was a simple error.
Okay. All right. Just administrator says, like, well, it wasn't us. Yeah,
Exactly.
okay. Back away as quick as you can.
But he had to go through the whole process of who he was grouped with, what wages he's paid, what's exempt, what's not, because he had to then prove that his wages wasn't 2 million. So,
okay, all right. So obviously your phone call or contact about payroll tax is a good reason to contact a great accountant.
Absolutely.
If not Queensland's best.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
So but they'd call you, Robert King and Experian there. How do they do that?
Yeah, so best way is to jump on our website, experian.com.au. We've got all our contact details there. You'll see a few articles about payroll tax on there as well. But we can, particularly if you get that first letter to say you need to register, flick it through to us, we'll help you out. And if you need to even do your payroll tax forms, we can do that as well. So happy to help.
Tremendous. Okay, Robert King, the resident expert accountant on the East Central Business Show. Plenty of great advice and things to be aware of around payroll tax. We'll speak to you next time. So thank you very much, Robert, for being the resident expert accountant on the East Central Business Show. And so just in this little post-roll segment, let's just talk briefly about who Experian are and the sort of client you like to talk to. We've got 2 minutes, let's go.
2 minutes, all right. We like to think we're a little bit different to other accountants out there. We like to wear, as you can see, jeans and a t-shirt and a jacket, as opposed to your typical accountant who wears a suit and tie and sits behind his desk all day. So we're a little bit
Don Johnson of accountants.
I didn't want to say anything, but now you've mentioned it, so you could be right. I think we're a little bit more approachable than a lot of other accountants out there. And as I've said in the past, one of our philosophies is not to charge people for phone calls. We don't want people sitting there afraid to ask us a question because they're going to get billed for the time.
Okay, fabulous. Now, importantly, the disclaimer in these video segments we do, is it advice?
Yeah, look, and that's very important. It's general advice only. It's a conversation starter. If you've heard something in this video that appeals to you that you need specific advice on, come and talk to us. We need to know what a client's individual circumstances are before we can give them tailored advice to suit their requirements.
Okay, the best way for them to do that is jump on your website and find the best phone number or best means to contact you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a few different offices around, so we've got some different phone numbers depending on where the client's located. But if you jump on our website, you can flick through an email or give us a call on the appropriate
website
office.
Is?
Experian.com.au.
Okay, very active on Facebook, so check out their Facebook page as well. That's where you'll find these videos as well.
Perfect. Thanks
Happy
for having
with
me.
that?
Pleasure.
All right, fabulous. We'll see you next time.